Thanksgiving morning was already cold, but nothing chilled me more than the moment my sister Simone handed me a paper plate and said, with a perfectly arched eyebrow and a cold smile, "You're used to scraps, right?" She didn't whisper it. She didn't say it in jest. She said it in front of the entire living room full of family. Then she turned on her heels and walked back to her polished dining room with the chandeliers gleaming overhead and the golden turkey laid out like a magazine spread. I stood frozen in the entryway, holding that plate like it had thorns. My two children, Ezra and Lila, stood behind me, saying nothing, but I could feel the shift in their energy. Ezra's shoulders went rigid. Lila clutched the pie she had helped me bake with both hands. I smiled, because that's what I do when I've run out of other options, and I said, "Come on, kids. Let's find our seats." Simone had prepared a spot for us in the garage. Not the den, not the patio, not even the breakfast nook. The garage. It smelled like dust, oil, and insulation. There was a folding table with 2 metal chairs and an overturned storage crate. That was it. No centerpiece, no place settings, no invitation to come back inside, and no one followed us out. Ezra sat down wordlessly. His jaw tightened in that way he does when he's trying to hold back emotion. Lila quietly climbed onto the crate and set the sweet potato pie in front of her. She didn't cry, but I could see the shimmer in her eyes. I sat down across from them, still holding that paper plate, and looked at the slices of turkey, the lukewarm beans, the mashed potatoes with no gravy. It wasn't just the food that felt cold. It was the message behind it. My mother, Margaret, hadn't even acknowledged us. She'd waved briefly when we walked in, then returned to sipping her wine and watching Simone's daughters perform a little dance number in front of the fireplace. Charles, Simone's ever-slick attorney husband, had greeted us with a nod and the usual condescension in his voice. "Hey, Naomi, you brought the kids, nice. Looks like they've grown. Hope you found parking." He said it like it was charity that we were even allowed in the driveway. This wasn't new. I'd felt like a second-class citizen in this family for as long as I could remember. I was the one who scribbled poetry in high school while Simone joined honor societies. I was the one who chose to work at a pediatric clinic and take freelance writing gigs on the side, instead of marrying a man with a Rolex and a corner office. I was the one who had to text to ask if we were still invited each year, and who always showed up with hope that maybe, this time, things would be different. But this year, as I sat in that cold garage with Ezra pushing peas around on his plate and Lila adjusting her dress so it wouldn't touch the dusty floor, something inside me cracked. Not with anger, not even with sadness, but with clarity. I was done trying to earn love that came with terms and conditions. I was done asking for warmth from people who thought my life was an inconvenience. Ezra broke the silence first. "Why did she do that?" His voice was quiet. Not confrontational, just honest. "We're family." I didn't have an answer. Not one that would make sense. Lila whispered, "Did we do something bad?" And I had to swallow a hard knot in my throat before I could say, "No, baby. We didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about us. It's about them." The sound of laughter drifted in from the main house. Champagne glasses clinked. Someone started playing music on the sound system. None of it reached us. The garage might as well have been in another city. I looked down at my kids, both of them trying to pretend this was okay, because they didn't want me to feel worse, and I knew. This was the last time. Then I heard it. Tires on gravel. A low hum followed by a sleek engine coming to a stop. I glanced toward the narrow garage window and caught a glimpse of black glass and silver trim. A limousine. Not a luxury SUV. Not a car service. A full-length, professionally chauffeured limousine pulling into the driveway of Simone's suburban palace. For a moment, no one moved. I could see the curtains in the main living room shift. Heads turned. My mother stood up from her wine glass. Charles stepped toward the window. Even Simone looked confused. I sat there, still in my chair, holding Lila's hand, not sure if I should expect a celebrity or a wedding guest at the wrong address. But the limo didn't stop at the front door. The driver, wearing white gloves, walked around and opened the rear passenger door. And then, to everyone's surprise, he began walking toward the side of the house. Toward the garage. Toward us. I stood slowly. Ezra stood too. Lila's grip tightened. I didn't know what was happening, but something told me this wasn't just a delivery. This wasn't a mistake. The moment the woman stepped out of the car, she changed the air around her. Tall, elegant, gracefully aged with silver hair and a chignon, and a navy blue wool coat that radiated dignity. She didn't look toward the front door. She walked directly to the garage and stopped just a few feet from where I stood. She looked me in the eye and said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for Naomi Blake." I blinked. "That's me." Her smile widened. "Good, because you're exactly who I came to see." And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about what I deserved began to shift. For a second, I couldn't speak. My mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. My kids looked up at me, startled but silent, waiting for my reaction. The woman in the navy coat stood calmly, her hands clasped in front of her, unbothered by the cold air or the awkward silence of the garage. She seemed entirely certain she was in the right place, like this was exactly where she had meant to be all along. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Hart," she said smoothly, "founder of Women Forward. We work in mentorship, advocacy, publishing, and outreach. You volunteered with one of our shelters a few years ago, correct?" I blinked. Yes, I did. "But I didn't think you wrote a series of essays afterward," she continued gently, "about single motherhood, resilience, and starting over. You posted them online." My heart dropped. I hadn't thought about those posts in years. They were from a season of life when everything was raw and unraveling. I had written them late at night from a secondhand laptop, typing quietly while Ezra and Lila slept beside me on a borrowed couch. I hadn't written them to be seen. I'd written them to survive. Evelyn's eyes softened. "I've been following your words ever since. You have a voice that makes people feel less alone, Naomi. And we need that now more than ever." Ezra glanced at me, unsure. Lila's grip on my sleeve tightened again. I finally managed to whisper, "You came here for me?" Evelyn smiled. "Yes, we're hosting a national summit next spring. I'd like you to be our opening keynote speaker." I couldn't process it. The word keynote hung in the air like it didn't belong to my world. She kept going. "We'll cover travel, accommodation, childcare if needed. In addition, our publishing partners would like to offer you a contract. We believe your voice is one the world needs to hear." Behind Evelyn, I could see the silhouettes still gathered at the front window of the main house. I knew they were watching, confused, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The family who had sent me to the garage was now watching a limousine arrive for me. Ezra leaned in. "Wait, she wants you to speak." Lila looked up, eyes wide. "Because of your writing?" Evelyn turned to them with a kind, confident nod. "Because your mother is extraordinary." I tried to stay composed, but the weight of those words, coming not from my sister, not from my mother, but from a stranger who actually saw me, hit me deep in the chest. I stood a little straighter. "I'm honored," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. "But why now? Why today?" Evelyn's expression was warm, but firm. "Because today, of all days, I want you to know you don't need a seat at someone else's table. You've been building your own all along." Something in me cracked open. Not like a wound, like a window. I turned to my kids. "We're going to need our coats." Ezra nodded immediately and began gathering our things. Lila stood still for a moment, then smiled, that quiet, knowing smile that only kids with old souls carry. She took my hand and said, "I'm glad she came." So was I. We walked out of the garage as one unit, not as guests, not as outsiders, but as a family stepping into something that had been waiting for us all along. When we reached the limousine, the door was already open. The inside glowed with soft lighting and warm leather seats. It smelled faintly of vanilla and cedar. The driver took our leftover plates like they were gold, storing them gently in the trunk. Evelyn slid in beside us and gave the signal to depart. As we pulled away, I allowed myself one final glance back at the house. There they were, Simone frozen at the window, glass of wine suspended midair, Charles leaning forward, his mouth slightly open, and my mother sitting rigid at the edge of the dining table, eyes narrowed, searching for some version of the story that made her the center of it. But for once, I wasn't looking for their reaction. I was looking ahead. Evelyn turned to me. "We have reservations downtown. Dinner, then a planning session. You'll tell me what support you need. And Naomi, she paused. No more garages. I smiled, truly smiled, as Lila rested her head against my arm and Ezra leaned into the corner seat. His body finally relaxed. No more garages, I echoed, because we weren't going back. Not to that house. Not to that version of ourselves. Not to silence. From this moment on, we were moving forward, in our own names, on our own terms. And the world had just opened its door to us. The restaurant Evelyn took us to was the kind of place I usually only saw in movies. Dim lighting that made everything feel golden, velvet-lined booths, soft jazz playing in the background, and servers who spoke to me like I mattered. Not just politely, but respectfully. The maitre d' greeted Evelyn by name and offered me a chair like I was someone important. For the first few minutes, I kept waiting for someone to realize I didn't belong, to call me out, to ask why a woman in worn boots and a borrowed coat was sitting in a place like this. But no one did, because for once, I wasn't being tolerated. I was being welcomed. Ezra and Lila sat close to me in the booth, both of them wide-eyed but composed. Evelyn had them each order something special from the kids' menu, and even that felt luxurious. I ordered grilled salmon because it was the first thing I saw and I didn't trust my voice enough to read the whole page. Evelyn ordered red wine, then looked at me. You okay? She asked. I nodded too quickly. Yes, I'm still trying to catch up. That's normal, she said with a smile. It takes a minute to realize you're no longer at their table. Her words hit deep, because she was right. I'd spent so many years trying to fit into rooms that were never built with me in mind. I tried to earn seats at tables that were too narrow for who I really was. And every time I tried to shrink myself to fit, I lost a piece of my voice, my light, my self-respect. Now, I was sitting across from a woman who knew my name before I ever said it. She saw my work, my worth, and she wasn't interested in making me smaller. She was offering me more space. Over dinner, Evelyn explained everything. The keynote event was scheduled for March. It would be in New York, in front of an audience of women leaders, advocates, and students. The theme was unseen to unstoppable, and she believed my story was the anchor it needed. You've lived the kind of truth that can't be faked, she said. And that's exactly what we want on that stage. I told her I wasn't sure I could do it, that I hadn't spoken in public since high school debate club, that I wasn't glamorous or polished or trained. She waved all of that away. What you are is real, she said. You're a mother who has fought quietly for years, a writer who gave without expecting applause, and a woman who sat in a garage without screaming, not because you were weak, but because your strength was reserved for something greater. People will listen to you because they'll recognize themselves. I nearly cried then, but I didn't. Not in front of the kids. Not in this beautiful place where I finally felt safe. After dessert, creme brulee for me, vanilla ice cream with gold sprinkles for the kids, Evelyn handed me a leather folder. Inside was a formal invitation to the summit, a preliminary publishing contract with a modest advance, and a handwritten note. It read, Naomi, the world tried to keep you quiet. We're here to turn up the volume. With gratitude. E-heart, asterisk, asterisk. I held it to my chest for a long moment before carefully placing it back inside. That night, after she dropped us off at home, I didn't sleep. I stayed up in the living room with a cup of peppermint tea, the folder on my lap, and my laptop open for the first time in months. I reread the essays I had written. The ones about living in the shelter, the ones about picking up night shifts at the clinic while hiding my tears in the supply closet, the ones about Lila's shoes being too tight, but me pretending she just liked walking funny. They were raw, honest, messy, but they were mine. Ezra padded out of his room around 2 a.m. You're still up? He asked. I nodded. Couldn't sleep. He looked at me, quiet for a moment, then said, They're going to hear you now. I nodded again, this time with more certainty. Yes, baby. They are. The next morning, I sent in the signed contract. Evelyn replied within an hour, Welcome aboard, Naomi. Let's make this loud. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to prove I belonged at someone else's table. I was preparing to stand at a podium and speak like I'd been meant to all along. I looked at the old wooden table in our kitchen, nicked at the edges, covered in sticker residue, always a little wobbly. But it had held every meal, every birthday cupcake, every tearful homework session. It had held my children, my prayers, my quiet victories, and I realized I never needed their table. I had built my own, strong, real, and full of love. Now the world was pulling up a chair. The official announcement went live on a Friday morning. It was a press release, but it felt like a thunderclap. Women Forward announces keynote speaker for 2025 National Summit. Naomi Blake, advocate, mother, and emerging voice in resilience literature. My name, right there, in headlines, in newsletters, on social media banners with my photo. A soft portrait Evelyn had arranged, taken by a gentle-eyed photographer who let me wear my own sweater because I said it felt more like me. The article went viral faster than I could comprehend. At first, it was just a few likes, a few kind comments. Then I saw retweets from women I'd admired for years. Advocates, journalists, even a senator. They weren't just applauding, they were sharing pieces of my essays, quoting my words, tagging their daughters. It felt unreal, but nothing prepared me for what happened next. The phone rang. Not the cell, the house phone. The one that only rang when someone from the family needed something, or forgot I preferred text. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. I finally answered on the fourth call. Simone. Her voice was carefully measured, like she was trying to sound casual but couldn't quite swallow the edge of surprise. Hey, Naomi. Wow. I just saw the announcement. I waited. Congratulations, she said. That's really unexpected. But I guess, writing has always been your thing. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully familiar. The way she danced around anything real. The way she tried to own part of my success by reminding me she always knew I had potential. I said thank you, nothing more. There was a pause. So, Mom wants to know if you're still coming to the Christmas dinner. She says she has a seat for you at the main table this time. The main table. Suddenly available. Suddenly open. I pictured it. The linen cloth, the tall candles, the place card with my name written in her cursive. A performance of inclusion. Not an apology. Not a change of heart. A performance to keep up appearances now that the world had recognized what they ignored. I'm not sure, I said. We'll be traveling a bit. Speaking engagements, interviews. It's a busy season. Simone clicked her tongue softly. Right. Of course. Well, if you're around, we'd love to see you. Ezra and Lila too. She hung up soon after. No warmth. Just the undercurrent of discomfort. Of a shifting power she couldn't quite name. That weekend, I received a package from Evelyn. Inside was a leather-bound planner engraved with my name, a gold pen, and a note. Use these to write the next chapters, yours, and the ones only you can inspire. I cried when I read it. Not just because of the kindness, but because it was the first time someone had given me tools for the future instead of reminders of my past. I began preparing for the summit with everything I had. I turned our small living room into a staging area. Ezra helped print cue cards. Lila timed my speech with her pink watch and told me which parts made her feel goosebumps. Evelyn connected me with a speaking coach who didn't try to change my voice, only taught me how to trust it. The speech itself grew out of my bones. It was part memoir, part war cry. I spoke about garages and paper plates, about invisible mothers, about the dignity we owe each other and ourselves. I spoke about building tables out of scrap wood and writing our names where no one gave us permission. Each night I rehearsed. Each morning I revised. My confidence didn't come in one grand wave. It arrived like a tide, steady and undeniable. The day before we flew out, another package arrived. It was from Margaret, my mother. No note, just a box. Inside, a dusty photo album from my childhood, torn at the spine, stuffed with old pictures. Some I remembered. Most I didn't. But tucked between 2 pages was a faded sheet of notebook paper. My first poem, written in crooked handwriting, dated years before anyone ever said I had talent. I sat on the floor, tracing the letters with my finger. It wasn't validation. It wasn't even forgiveness. But it was something. A thread. A beginning. Maybe she remembered more than I thought. Maybe she was listening now. But whether she was or not, I knew one thing for certain. The next room I was about to walk into, the one with 1,000 women waiting, had a table I didn't beg to be seated at. It was mine. And this time I would speak first. The ballroom was nothing like the spaces I was used to. The ceiling soared so high they seemed to hold clouds, and the walls glittered with gold trim that shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Rows upon rows of chairs were filled with women, young, old, professionals, survivors, dreamers. They sat with eyes forward, programs in their hands, waiting for me. Backstage, I paced in silence. My hands trembled, though I'd rehearsed every word 100 times. I wore a soft blue dress that Lila had picked out, saying it made me look like sky and strength. Ezra had smoothed the creases from my shoulders just before we left the hotel, whispering, "You've got this, Mom." And now here I was, moments from the speech that would either rise or fall on the breath of every choice I'd ever made. Evelyn appeared beside me. She didn't offer a pep talk. She didn't list my accomplishments or read me a bio. She simply placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "Speak like the world is finally listening, because today it is." The stage manager gave the signal. The music faded. A hush fell over the room. And then I walked out. The lights were bright, but not blinding. I found the podium. My notes waited, but I barely looked at them. I placed both hands on the wood, took a breath, and began. My name is Naomi Blake, and not long ago, I was eating Thanksgiving dinner in a garage. A few people gasped. Some blinked in surprise, but no one looked away. I spoke slowly at first, about paper plates and folding chairs, about invisible women with entire galaxies inside them, about the hunger for dignity that went beyond food. I told them about my kids, about quiet strength, about love that didn't beg for recognition. Then I spoke of the day a limousine came for me, the way it didn't feel like a rescue, but a reminder that I was never the problem, that I had always been the story. People leaned in. Heads nodded. Some clutched their chests. Others wiped tears. And when I said, "We don't need their seats if we can build our own tables," the room erupted. Applause didn't wait until the end. It came in waves, rising and falling as I poured out everything I had held inside for years. Every moment of rejection. Every bruise that never showed. Every word I'd been too afraid to say. I ended with Lila's voice in my mind, and I said, "The next generation is watching us. Let them see what it looks like to be fully, unapologetically seen." When I finished, the room rose. A standing ovation, not out of politeness, but out of recognition. These women didn't just hear me. They heard themselves. Backstage, I was met with arms around me. Evelyn hugged me tight. "You didn't just speak," she said. "You lit a fire." The rest of the day blurred into handshakes and cameras, signatures and invitations, publishing offers, podcast requests, panel discussions. It was overwhelming, but not in the way I feared. It felt earned. It felt right. Later that night, in the quiet of the hotel room, I sat with Ezra and Lila on either side of me. We were barefoot, eating room service fries in bed. Lila held my hand and asked, "Will we go back to Aunt Simone's next year?" I smiled. "Only if they come to our table." Ezra chuckled. "We don't have space in the garage anymore." I laughed with them, my heart full in a way I hadn't known it could be. Because I wasn't just accepted now. I was heard. I was wanted. I was building something real, not just for me, but for every woman who ever thought she had to wait to be chosen. I turned off the lamp, kissed their foreheads, and whispered, "Sleep well, my loves." The world had changed, but more importantly, so had I. Spring came early that year, as if the season itself had been waiting for something new. Our tiny apartment was filled with light and warmth and the sound of possibility. I had just returned from another speaking engagement in Boston, where 3 young women hugged me after the event and told me I had made them call their mothers. That night, I cried alone in my hotel room, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming truth that my story had become something larger than me. Then, one quiet afternoon, an envelope arrived. No return address. My name, written in the familiar looping cursive I hadn't seen in a while. I knew the handwriting. I sat with it in my lap for minutes before opening it. It was from Margaret, my mother. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. No greeting, no preamble, just a few lines, written with a trembling hand. Naomi, I don't know when I stopped seeing you. Maybe I never really did. But I watched you on that stage. And for the first time, I realized I've never been as brave as you. I was wrong. I'm sorry. M asterisk asterisk. I read it once, then twice, then again. My hands shook, but not from anger. Because buried in those few words was something I had never received before. Not from her, not from any of them. An acknowledgement, an admission, a kind of release. I folded the letter back, pressed it to my chest, and exhaled. I didn't write back. Not because I was bitter, but because I didn't need to. Some stories are complete with silence. Some healing doesn't require a return. Instead, I took the letter to the table we now use for everything. Homework, interviews, pancake Sundays. I slid it beneath the leather folder Evelyn once gave me. I called it my roots, my past, and I kept it close, but no longer heavy. That weekend, Ezra was accepted into a student journalism program. Lila joined a youth poetry collective. They both carried pieces of me, but they also soared on wings of their own. People began writing to me, women from shelters, teachers from rural towns, single dads, grandmothers raising grandchildren. They said, I saw myself in your story. They said, you helped me remember I matter. And I always replied the same way. You were never invisible. You were waiting to be seen. A year passed, then another. By the time I was invited back to keynote again, this time with my own published memoir sitting in bookstores, the story had already stretched beyond my control. And I was glad. Because I no longer needed to be in control. I just needed to be true. The limo pulled up again, this time to a little house with flowers in the front and hand-painted wind chimes by the porch. Ezra helped me with my bag. Lila held my speech folder. They were taller now. Stronger. So was I. I turned back one last time to see the kitchen window where we had once cried over bills and dreams and reheated leftovers. It wasn't a place of shame anymore. It was proof of everything we'd built with nothing but love and persistence and a belief that the world could still surprise us. As we drove toward the next stage, the next microphone, the next soul waiting to hear that they mattered, I whispered something only I could hear. I was never meant for the garage. I was always the light outside it. And this time I smiled without fear. Because I wasn't going back. I was going forward and taking the world with me.